Kara didn't mind the night shifts. The little dispatch center out in Wexler County hardly saw much action after dark. A drunk driver here, a coyote attack there. Mostly, it was rerouting wrong numbers and nodding off over lukewarm coffee. That changed on a Wednesday, just after midnight. The emergency line buzzed once, then again. She answered, "Wexler County 911, what's your emergency?" Only static. Then, a faint sound, almost a whisper. "Help." The voice was thin, crumpled, as if dragged from under a heavy weight. Before Kara could press for details, the line cut dead. Chalking it up to a crossed signal, she logged it and forgot about it, until the next night. At 12:17 a.m., the call came again. This time, there were names. Annie, Hendricks Street, trapped. The voice whimpered, barely audible. When Kara searched the map, there was no Hendricks Street in Wexler County. Not anymore. Curious and unsettled, Kara dug into the archives. In 1978, a fire destroyed a neighborhood, Hendricks Street, leaving 7 dead. Among them, an Annie Lowell. Each night after that, the calls came more frequently. More names, more lost streets, more desperate pleas. She cross-referenced them all. Every single voice belonged to a real tragedy, accidents and crimes decades old. And every night, the voices grew louder, more frantic, begging her. By the 3rd week, Kara barely slept. Her headset seemed to bleed whispers even when idle. The low murmur of "help us" pulsed in her ears like a heartbeat. Then came the call that changed everything. It was her own voice. "Dispatch, please listen. I'm trapped. It's happening tonight. Wexler Bridge, please hurry." Click. Terror iced her veins. She checked the clock. 12:03 a.m. The voice had mentioned tonight. Without thinking, Kara grabbed her jacket and keys. She couldn't explain it. She just knew she had to go. The roads were a graveyard under the cold stars. Wexler Bridge loomed ahead, rotting and unused since the 80s. She left the car running, flashlight in hand. Nothing. No accident, no smoke, no wreckage. Only the hollow wind through the broken beams. She almost turned back when she saw it. Faint footprints in the mud, leading off the bridge. She followed them to an abandoned farmhouse nearby, its door creaking in the wind. Inside, the flashlight beam caught something glinting. An old tape recorder sat on the floor. It clicked itself on. Kara's own voice spilled out, ragged and terrified. "Please, if anyone hears this, help me. They're here. They're coming." Then static. And from the darkness upstairs, something began to move. She ran. Back at the dispatch center, Kara collapsed into her chair, hyperventilating. The clock ticked over, 3:33 a.m. The emergency line lit up. She stared, hand trembling, picked up, only static. Then, faint and crackling, her own voice whispered, "Help, still here, still waiting." And somewhere, deep in the unused lines of Wexler County's forgotten tragedies, Kara's voice joined the chorus. Now, whenever a lost soul calls into the night, sometimes they'll hear her, the operator who never made it back. Cass knew she needed a change. The city had drained her dry. No inspiration, no commissions, no hope. When she found the listing, historic studio space, furnished, mirrors included, it felt like fate. The place was strange. High ceilings, dust-choked chandeliers, and walls lined with massive antique mirrors, their frames blackened with age. Cass almost turned back when she saw them, dozens of warped reflections crowding her every move. But desperation is a powerful motivator. At first, it was fine. The mirrors only reflected her new canvases, her furious attempts to feel something again. Late at night, hunched over an easel, she sometimes thought she heard soft murmurs, faint, breathy compliments. Beautiful work. Such talent. She laughed it off. Loneliness made people hear things, right? Then she noticed the reflections lagging behind. Tiny delays. Her hand would set down a brush, but the mirror would hesitate. Sometimes the reflected Cass would smirk, even when she didn't. The whispers changed too. They grew sharper. Bolder strokes, Cass. You can do better. You must do better. The paintings changed with them. Gone were the calm landscapes and delicate portraits. Her brush tore across canvas with manic energy, painting scenes she didn't recognize. Twisted forests, eyeless faces, burning churches under black suns. She didn't remember starting them. But the mirrors showed her reflection painting feverishly, grinning. Cass tried to leave once, suitcase packed. But the moment she reached the door, the studio lights buzzed and died. In the dark glass of the mirrors, she saw herself fractured into thousands of sharp, broken pieces, each shard watching her, trapped. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. Lightning clawed across the sky, casting the studio into strobing nightmares of light and shadow. Cass stood before the largest mirror, an enormous, floor-to-ceiling slab, warped with centuries of time. The reflection didn't match her anymore. It was painting something new, her, wide-eyed and slack-jawed, hands bound in thorns. It turned to her, smiled with black gums, and whispered aloud through the glass. "Join me." Cass screamed and hurled a chair at the mirror. With a deafening crack, the glass shattered, and from the ruins, something stepped out. A doppelganger, perfect except for the hungry gleam in its eyes. It lunged. What followed was a brutal, desperate battle, not with fists, but with minds. The reflection moved with predatory grace, mimicking every thought before she could act. Each mirror in the room flickered between Cass and the thing, showing her losing ground, her face melting into a terrified grimace. She fought until her strength gave out. Until finally, silence. In the grey morning light, the studio sat empty. The mirrors were smashed, the canvases slashed and scattered. Near the centre of the room, among the broken glass, a single painting stood upright. It showed a woman, Cass, pounding helplessly on the inside of a mirror, her mouth frozen mid-scream. And somewhere, out in the waking world, Cass's doppelganger walked free, wearing her face, smiling her smile, starting a perfect new life. In Halverston, people whispered about the 99 Midnight Line, a bus that appeared only when the streets were empty and the air tasted like metal. They said anyone who boarded was never seen again. Theo didn't believe in ghost stories. A burned-out freelance journalist chasing clickbait headlines, he figured the legend was just a city scare tactic, a trick to keep kids off the streets at night. Until the night he missed the last regular bus. It was nearly 2 a.m., and Theo trudged down an abandoned stretch of Marrow Lane, icy rain slicking the pavement. That's when he saw it. A double-decker bus, black as soot, idling silently at the curb. Its windows were empty, the inside swallowed by darkness. Above the windshield, the destination sign flickered. Last run. A daredevil instinct kicked in. He was cold, exhausted, desperate to get home, and curious. Pulling his jacket tighter, Theo boarded. The doors sighed shut behind him. The interior was wrong. The seats were coated in a thin layer of dust. The overhead lights flickered sickly. The driver, a tall, thin man in an antique conductor's uniform, stared dead ahead, hands folded neatly in his lap. He never moved, never spoke. Theo moved up the aisle, heart hammering. The dashboard flashed impossible route names. Bridgewater Crossing, collapsed 1953. Ash Hollow, flooded 1979. Marrow Heights Orphanage, fire 1968. Places that didn't exist anymore. Places marked by tragedy. The bus shuddered forward. At every stop, it paused. And at every stop, Theo glimpsed them. Ghostly passengers at the windows, pale, tattered, pressing their hands against the glass, mouths moving, but making no sound, eyes pleading. Theo tried to stand, to scream, to demand the driver stop. The conductor's dead eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror, a silent warning, and Theo sat back down, trembling. The ride plunged deeper into the city's underbelly, through streets he barely recognized. Then, finally, the brakes hissed. The doors groaned open, and Theo froze. Beyond the threshold wasn't a stop or a street he knew. It was his old neighborhood, as it looked decades ago. The candy shop, the soda fountain, and the alley where, as a little boy, he had run and screamed from something he could never quite remember. A childhood nightmare he had buried deep. Now, it was waiting for him. At the end of the alley, something black and sprawling shifted under the flickering streetlights. Theo stumbled off the bus. Behind him, the doors hissed closed. He turned to watch the 99 Midnight Line roll away silently, its destination sign flashing one last time. Passenger count, 0. The city around him wasn't his anymore. Wrong somehow. Slower, darker, like the whole world had skipped a beat and never recovered. When the sun rose, Theo wasn't at his apartment. He wasn't anywhere people would find. Days later, a newspaper ran a headline. Midnight bus legend, another local missing after last seen near Marrow Lane. Another ghost story. Another passenger on the last run. And if you ever find yourself on a lonely street past midnight, you might see it too. The bus waiting. The door cracked open just for you. But be warned, once you board, there's no way back. Dr. Lorna Vance had stared into the dark for most of her life. As chief radio astronomer at the Adraxis Observatory, she spent sleepless nights combing the static for patterns, anomalies, meaning. On a brittle November evening, her array picked up something impossible. A dying neutron star, JX 1911, flaring not in chaos, but order. At first, it was a rhythm, a pulse. Then the pulses formed sequences, prime numbers, fractal-like progressions, an intelligence. Lorna fine-tuned the telescope, and the messages began to change her. The sequences embedded themselves into her mind. When she closed her eyes, she saw swirling glyphs, maps of galaxies folding like paper, spiraling into impossible geometries. The stars outside the observatory began to twitch, constellations she knew her whole life. Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major, now wrong. Shifted, warped, the sky reassembling itself by an unseen hand. Her colleagues noticed too. Some fell silent, pale and wide-eyed. Others raved about the pattern before disappearing into the desert night, never seen again. The message was clear, if one dared to look. We remember you. Lorna dug deeper, obsessed. The radio arrays were no longer tuned to stars. They were tuned to something staring back. On the night of the live experiment, a foolish broadcast meant to respond. The world broke open. All across town, radios, televisions, phones hijacked. No matter the channel, the same static-laced hum rose like a funeral hymn. From the center of town to the abandoned drive-in, the message leaked out. A voice not made for human ears. A presence not bound to human sight. Above, the sky ignited, not with auroras, but alien sigils, burning across the heavens in violet and black. Each symbol drilled itself into the minds of the watchers. Reality twisted. For one breathless instant, Earth was pulled into a greater map, an ancient, living cartography of civilizations that burned, rose, and died before humanity ever drew breath. At the center, it hovered, a colossal entity, shimmering like a wound in the sky, its eyes voids within voids, a mind so vast the oceans would seem puddles beside it. It gazed down, calculating, and then it spoke. "Are you ready to join us?" The question wasn't for Lorna alone. It echoed through every terrified mind. A choice, but not a kind one. The power snapped back on like a whip crack. The stars blinked back into their rightful places, dull and distant once more. But the survivors were changed. Some chanted the alien sigils in endless broken loops. Some simply walked into the desert, never returning. Others sat silent in their homes, eyes blank, lips stitched with the memory of what they had seen. Dr. Lorna Vance disappeared without a trace. All that remained of her was the last log entry in the observatory's cold console. "We are not alone. We were never alone. We are remembered." And now, sometimes, on moonless nights, radios across the town crackle awake. A single, unbroken pulse, steady as a heartbeat, whispering to those who dare to listen, calling them home. They told Mason Brookfield the village of Grey Hollow was peaceful, a little farming town, tucked between hills that smelled of wet hay and river mist. Cheap rent, simple life, good people. No one told him about the scarecrow. It began small. The corn in the surrounding fields grew unnaturally tall, taller than a man, even though it hadn't rained for weeks. Corn husk dolls, crude and eyeless, appeared tied to fence posts, their tiny arms nailed open like martyrs. At night, Mason caught glimpses of his neighbors, heads bowed, whispering, always near the fields, and always, always under the eye of the thing in the center. A towering scarecrow, its hat slouched low, its stitched mouth eternally grinning. Crows never dared land near it. Then came the announcement. At the town square, under a sky swollen with storm clouds, the mayor spoke. The Harvest King has been chosen. Every villager turned and looked at Mason. Their smiles were brittle, their eyes empty. It was him. He tried to run. A car packed by midnight, tires spinning for the nearest highway. But a freak storm rose out of nowhere, winds howling like a living thing. Branches tore the roads apart, and always, on every corner, he glimpsed it. The scarecrow, standing just a little closer than before. At the tavern, a crumbling drunk handed him an old, tattered journal. Inside were stories, sketches of the scarecrow from generations past. Once, it had been a man, a reaper cursed by the village after a cruel winter of famine and betrayal. The last words in the journal chilled Mason to the bone. Better to feed it one of ours than watch us all starve. On harvest night, the bonfires were lit. Chants rose, low and rhythmic. Mason, bound and dragged to the clearing at the heart of the fields, saw the villagers dance in savage circles. Their faces glowed orange against the blood-red sky. Children wove garlands of blackened corn. Old men sharpened sickles. The scarecrow moved. Its long legs tore up earth with every step. It reeked of mold and old blood. Its hollow chest yawned open to reveal a nest of worms and bone relics from Harvest Kings past. Mason had a choice. At his feet, a splintered pitchfork gleamed dully in the firelight. Fight and maybe kill the monster, or submit and hope to be remembered kindly. Heart hammering, Mason seized the pitchfork. He lunged. Steel plunged into rotten burlap flesh. The scarecrow screeched, a sound like the tearing of worlds. It crumpled into a heap of ash and straw. The fields around them died instantly. Corn blackened on the stalk. Cows dropped dead where they stood. The villagers howled, not in rage, but in pure terror. They screamed at Mason, clawed at their faces, wailed at the empty sky. "You've killed us. You've doomed Grey Hollow." In the aftermath, Mason wandered the hollow fields. Nothing grew. The wells ran dry. The villagers packed up, fled, or simply faded into the land like mist. Mason left too, haunted by what he'd done, by what he saw, by what he might have become. But far beyond Grey Hollow, over the hills and down the misty valley, a new scarecrow stood erect. It wore a crooked hat. Its stitched mouth smiled wider than before. Waiting, watching. The harvest never ends. Camille Rain lived for the stream. Morning vlogs, makeup tutorials, midnight confessionals. Her life, filtered and flawless, played out to 5 million followers. When she teased her new AR filter, TrueView, the hype was instant. "See your real self," the tagline promised, splashed across neon posts and viral teasers. At first, the filter was harmless fun. It added tiny illusions, cracks in the skin, flickering golden eyes, a glitching halo. Fans flooded her comments. "Creepy cute, so real, more. But then it started changing. During a late-night stream, Camille noticed it. In the background of her feed, in the corner of the screen, something moved. A shape. Faint. Wrong. She laughed it off, blamed the lighting. Her fans loved it, begged her to keep using the filter. Every day after, the shadow grew bolder. Always behind her, always closer. At first, it had no face, just a smudge of darkness. But the longer she streamed, the more it took shape. Gaunt hands, a tattered dress, hair plastered to its cheeks like wet straw. Private messages started pouring in, screenshots from fans. Camille's own selfies, warped frames she didn't remember taking, her eyes black and depthless, her smile split too wide. Desperate, Camille traced TrueView back to its roots. The company was defunct. An indie developer called Larkspur Games, shut down after a scandal years ago. The founder, an obsessed coder, had based the app's image recognition data on an unsolved case. A missing child from the early 2000s. A little girl named Mara Larkspur. The girl was never found. The whispers started next. At night, in the mirror, Camille would see her, Mara, standing just behind her reflection, mouthing something she couldn't hear. Screens would flicker even when her devices were off. At 3:33 a.m., her phone would light up with grainy old photos of a child's birthday party. In every frame, Camille's own adult face floated eerily among the laughing children. She tried to uninstall the filter. The button grayed out, The app laughed at her. On the night of her biggest live stream ever, a brand sponsorship worth millions, the horror peaked. The camera flickered violently. The TrueView filter shattered mid-broadcast, tearing Camille's image into glitching fragments. Amara stepped into the frame. For the first time, all 5 million viewers saw her clearly. A small, decayed girl in a party dress, smiling with cold, endless eyes. She reached toward Camille with hands like withered paper. The lights died. The feed spiraled into static. Viewers screamed in chat. Screens froze on the last burning image. Camille, smiling a broken, hollow smile, her eyes black as voids. The stream ended abruptly. Camille's account was never officially deleted. But when fans refreshed her page, all they found was a single new post, a selfie. Camille, head tilted sweetly, staring through them, eyes black, smile stitched wide. At the bottom, a new caption flickered for a heartbeat before vanishing into corrupted code. Tag me in your next life. Some say if you screenshot that post, a strange filter appears over your camera too. And behind you, just out of focus, someone starts to move.